All right. I think we are live. Yay. Hello. Let's see. Oh, hi, Gwendolyn. Okay, so for anyone that's joining us on the live, thank you, thank you. I think Marcy's going to be here short.
Oh, no.
And there
Oh, no. You just clicked.
We're off to a great start, guys.
It's all good. Listen, this has happened to me before. It's going to be okay. She's back. She's back.
It's
It's
all
all good. We're
It's all
safe.
good.
Oh, geez. I don't even know what I just did.
You exited the window, I think.
Okay, let's see here. Okay, so let's see. Hello, Book Terror. All right, so let's talk about, Ashley, hi. Let's talk about why we're here. So the reason I wanted to do this is because Beth and I were talking about the book Dead Inside by Chandler Morrison. I don't know if all of y'all are familiar with that. But it's got some really, really dark content, like really, really dark. And she had done almost like a vlog on her Instagram, and some people were reacting very poorly. At the same time, when I read a few books like The Girl Next Door by Jack Ketchum, I caught myself subconsciously judging the author, even though, like, we know, actually, is that one based? I think that one's actually based on a true story. But nonetheless,
Yes.
it got me thinking about why we judge people, and can we and should we be judging people based on the fiction that they like, that they write, that they consume, and where's the nuance in that conversation? So I thought that, we could bring some people together here. Hold on. Here's Marcy. Hi, Marcy.
Hey.
Oh.
And have a discussion about it. Okay. So actually, before we get into it, hi everybody. Let's have y'all go around and introduce your channels. Are you cool with that?
Yeah.
So Izzy, why don't you start? Izzy's our resident romance reader for this conversation.
Yeah, I'm Izzy or Isabel, whatever you want to call me. I'll respond generally. My channel is Happy for Now. I predominantly talk about romance. I also talk about manga, and I cover romance news. So dark topics come up a lot, of course, because, dark romance is a thing. But yeah, I'm excited.
Cool. Me. Jaymes, go ahead.
Okay, hello. I am Jaymes from the channel Jaymes' Space, but we are not active right now. We're under construction. But yeah, feel free and watch the backlog if you're interested. Super queer. So that's what we represent. Yeah.
Awesome. Beth, you want to go ahead?
My name is Beth. I have a booktube channel where I read a lot of horror and thrillers. Mostly, I also am over on TikTok in the book talk world. And that's it.
Can I just say, follow her book talk, because she literally has me piss my pants laughing all the time.
We love Beth. Awesome. Okay, Mara, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Mara from Books Like Whoa, and I read, I think, a little bit of everything. Yeah, so I read a lot of dark crap, and do we swear on this channel? Is it okay if we swear?
Oh yeah, I swear
okay.
all the time.
I read dark shit. I like a mafia romance. I like a super bloody thriller. So yeah, looking forward to talking about it.
Awesome. Marcy, go ahead.
Hey guys, I'm Marcy and I'm from Marcy Reads, and I'm usually over on Instagram more than YouTube. I've been sort of kind of away from YouTube for the past couple of weeks, but I read a little bit of everything as well, but I predominantly read horror. But every now and then I gotta, change it up a little bit because, the darkness just overweighs me a little bit. But yeah, I do wrap-ups, book hauls, a lot of book hauls because I love to buy books. And yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Okay, so generally speaking, what do you guys think? Should we judge someone's morality based on the fiction that they consume?
Definitely not. Definitely not. I think that we all have like that curious, I guess it's human nature, to have like the curiosity towards the dark. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're a bad person or you're going to go into the things that you're reading about. It's just a morbid fascination and curiosity with the dark, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely think that is one of the reasons. And that's definitely applies to me as well. Like, as a curiosity, but I think there's like a scope of different reasons why people like these. But I also feel like, some people say that if you like dark things, if you like dark fiction, that makes you a bad person and that it's revealing something about you from deep within you. Other people say it's not connected at all. This is fiction. It is not real. This is completely separate. I like to think there's some kind of spectrum in the middle there that it doesn't have to be like binary in that sense.
I mean, I think it's kind of a middle of the road thing where it depends on how you act about the fiction you read. Because like I know in the romance community, sometimes they get a little, we can get a little high and mighty about the fact that we only read dark fiction, if that makes sense. And thus I'm better than you because like I don't need the content warning. I don't need the heads up. I'm over here just reading whatever gets put in front of me with no like critical analysis, because I think often you're using darkness to examine something else in our reality, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I like this comment here.
I do too.
Which one?
What Beth has to say, I think that's very
That is very accurate also, because I'm obviously just a whore because I predominantly read romance. Like, just
I mean, that's my takeaway.
And that
obviously
that is a
With
similar
me and like
question.
with the trigger warning thing, I don't like trigger warnings, and with people who give a lot of trigger warnings in their videos, I won't watch their videos. But it's not because I'm trying to like be like a pro in the horror darkness. It's because I feel like those spoil me for like the twisted things that I want to encounter by myself, if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense.
I agree with that 100%. I don't really like overly stating trigger warnings necessarily, which to each their own, obviously. But I think, at least for the people that I've seen here, most of us are just like, look it up if you need that. We're not going to spoil anything for you. And I definitely feel that way. I also like what Elizabeth said about there being a spectrum, because I don't know. I think we're all like too inside of ourselves to really know why we like what we like. But I do think it's interesting to think that like maybe some part of this is connected to, something in the past or childhood trauma or something like that. I don't think it's one way or the other.
Mm-hmm. Somebody mentioned, was it Ashley? Somebody mentioned the book Savage Appetites, which I read recently and really loved. And it's seeking to, actually, I think I got that rec from you, Mara.
Yeah, I really loved that one last year.
And it's seeking to ask like why women are attracted to dark things. And that's something that I've asked myself on multiple occasions as to like, why do I like dark stuff? And at some point you have to admit that it's not just like it makes me feel safer, but you just like it too, and that's okay. We're allowed to just like it, and
I'd rather read about it than be like in the middle of it. So I have to, I want to experience it. So let me read, but I don't want to be there,
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will say, just in terms of like Ashley Doyle just had a good comment. I do think I am for trigger warnings because I do think that there are some things that really can ruin someone's day. It's interesting coming from a like, if you mainly read horror, I can totally see why some of the content warnings I would feel a need to give would be spoilers for that kind of book. But like animal abuse in particular, what Ashley mentions, that's one I try to mention because like some people just cannot. Like that will ruin their day. And it's like, I would never, I think I have a feeling of like, I never want to recommend something to somebody that hits them from the side in a way that would ruin their day. But I think, I don't want to get like super detailed, but it's like, hey, here's something you should know about this book, which is
I'm the same
a lot of animals die.
Like if there's an animal that I'm just like, yep, there's that. Or another one I do a lot. Like I know people don't give often is miscarriage, because I have a friend who literally had a miscarriage and then got knocked on her butt like repeatedly by books, just out of nowhere. No one mentioned it, and I was just like, well, this is now on my have to mention this list because like I just don't want to ruin anybody's day. But I think it's different when you're coming in from the horror genre a little bit too, though.
Yeah,
I feel like you're
trigger...
expecting twisted.
Yeah.
And
sorry.
No, you're fine.
I think that trigger warnings are also very like subjective because like for me, for example, I don't talk about trigger warnings. I mean, I read extreme horror, so I mean, there's not a lot that I'd be like, oh, trigger warning for this is, you know, there's too many. But I do, because it affects me so much, I do talk about animal cruelty when it is part of the book, because that will depress me for months to come. Like today I was sitting with my mom eating and she's just telling me about a cute movie she watched, but she talks about how this dog was like searching for their owner, which had passed away. And I was crying for the rest of breakfast. And it wasn't even animal cruelty. It was just something that made the animal hurt, you know, like emotions wise. And so that's why I mention it. And I also mention child abuse because that is such a big thing. But other than that, I don't tend to talk about trigger warnings.
I particularly try to give it if it's a book that you wouldn't expect it in. So like recently I've been reading Robin Hobb, and if you read any of her Realm of the Elderlings books, those are fantasy books, but like the kind of magic that's used, there's a lot of animal cruelty and death, and it's like you wouldn't necessarily expect that from a fantasy. But anyway, sorry, I don't want to harp on that, but just I totally get from like a horror perspective why that might not be, that could very frequently be a spoiler, but for other genres I think maybe a little less so.
I guess you're right. Yeah, in some other genres maybe not. It's weird because like animal horror doesn't really bother me, but I have my beloved dog. I love Denver to death, and I'm a dog person and I love animals, but like animal abuse doesn't trigger me in books, but like gaslighting really does. So everybody's different. And so like on that note, sometimes I wonder if being able to read dark fiction is a privilege in itself, because sometimes I think if you had gone through certain things, you wouldn't be able to enjoy fiction like that. But I've also read there are other people who have gone through dark things that almost use that and it doesn't trigger them. It's something that like helps them work through that. So I think I
definitely think that's on like a person to person basis, because like I've had a stillbirth and I can read books about miscarriages and things like that and it doesn't bother me, but I definitely would never, and that's one of the trigger warnings that I would tell people, well, with an exception, because like if you read, there's a short story by Stephen King that I read, if you were to give out that trigger, then you basically know the ending. But I do think the whole what people can and cannot, I don't know, I feel like it's definitely person to person and not necessarily if this person has had a butterflies and rainbow childhood, then they can't or cannot read or can read such and such, because I've gone through a lot of dark things, and that could be why there's nothing that triggers me really, except for Chandler Morrison. He triggers me, but other than that, there's nothing else.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's got a strong stomach for pretty much anything, which I love.
I like the question being posed of like, is you being able to enjoy this, is that coming from a place of privilege? That's something I've never thought about at all. So I don't really have any concrete like answer to that, but it's definitely something to think about. And then what did you just say, Beth? I'm sorry, I totally blanked, but you said something and it made me want to say something.
I was piggybacking off of Elizabeth, and I think that how people will say like, oh, this person has gone through so much in their life that they can't read horror or they need all the trigger warnings, but I think that really it's not that. I think it's a person to person thing. So like I've gone through, if I tell you my story, you would probably be, I've gone through a lot, and I
will cry in the corner. I'm a Pisces. I will literally cry in the corner.
But I know people also who have had like this perfect childhood with both parents and nothing happening, and they can't even watch. Like I couldn't watch Courage the Cowardly Dog when I was little because it was too scary for me. So I do definitely think it's like from person to person, and it's not like, well, this everybody fits into this category.
Right.
That's it.
Right. It was the, you saying that you can read things about miscarriage and stuff like that. So like for me, I have like this weird obsession with fiction that has like queer trauma in it. And on one hand, like, I guess the biggest reference I have is the book Bathhouse. But on one hand, I'm like really into it, loved the book, like so fun, whatever. But then on the other hand, like, I really feel like I was getting insight about like past situations that I've personally been in. And like, I don't know. It's this really interesting thing because I rated it 5 stars, absolutely loved it, but then immediately got rid of it as soon as I finished. So
it can even be like, yeah, I think it just does vary so much, even just from the type of book. Like, I think you had a comment up from Heather about dark romance and like wanting to set the expectations. It's like, even within a genre, the kind of book it is can like change my tolerance level for some of that.
Yep.
Like in a Kindle Unlimited romance, like you can go as dark as you want, pretty much, because like I'm expecting something pretty wild. But like if it's like an Avon book that's like in the supermarket,
and it's got like the illustrated cover, and there's like sexual assault in it, you're going, what's going on? This doesn't match.
I'm like, if this is next to my mom's Danielle Steele she's picking up, and there's like an essay in this room, like that it's a little too much for me. But and same for like mystery or horror. Like if I have the expectation going in of like this is gonna be dark, then like I usually can kind of roll with it more. But if I go in thinking like, oh, this is like more of a mystery, a whodunit, like there'll be a little murder in this village, and then all of a sudden like really grim shit starts happening, it's like, oh gosh, okay, that's just not really what I thought I was getting in for on this one.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mara. I think like the tone of the book definitely sets your expectation. In Heather, hey books. I read Ice Planet Barbarians, the first one, just the first one, and I loved it. But there was some stuff in there that was like not okay. Like if you're like,
I think people don't know that it gets pretty rapey in that first one. Like,
she edited one of them out in the new print at least. So.
Oh, did she?
Oh, really?
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, the ship one. Yeah, the special editions. The ship one in the beginning.
Oh, which is the one that's
probably
too much. Yeah.
I tell people to skip that chapter. Like, but yeah, like that. Like if you pick up that special edition, you're gonna be like, what?
Yeah, but for some reason the tone of that book was so lighthearted, and like the characters were making me laugh so much that it just did not trigger me in that like sense. I did not have an issue with it. And so it's really funny how that can change your perspective on what you're consuming.
It does, yeah.
So let's see. So as far as we were kind of getting into dark fiction as a form of healing. So let's kind of dive into that a little bit. Do you think that some people enjoy this as a way to gain control over their fears? I was reading an article earlier, and it said, what did it say? It said that when people who really enjoy dark fiction, they have a sort of psychological frame that they can place between themselves and the work that allows them to separate from it. And in that separation and that detachment, that's what allows you to enjoy it, because you can kind of step out from it. And being someone who suffers with anxiety, I feel like sometimes people ask me, like, why would you want to read about this stuff if you have anxiety? But it's like, at the same time, this anxiety, I have control over. Like, this is in my control. I can stop it. I can start it. And just having that almost makes me feel like I am overpowering that fear. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what do you guys think?
I mean, I know in with romance in general, I feel like a lot of women and people in general, romance isn't just for women. So I don't want to just say women, but anyone who reads romance may have dealt with like sexual assault or other things like that. And reading about a character who was sexually assaulted find love oftentimes is healing in that way, where you realize that like you too, though you went through a traumatic event, are worthy of this thing. And I know a lot of people that read romance have been through that and do read romances with rape and other things in it like that to like kind of heal themselves a little bit in that framework.
Yeah,
which is
that
probably
makes sense.
different than reading horror of it.
I feel like things that I have gone through in my past, there are some books that I read that like really closely align to that. And
Mhm.
even if the book is super poorly written, I will still give that book 5 stars because I felt connected to the book and I felt like the author knew what I was going through. And
Mhm.
like I read Ugly Love. I don't know if y'all read Ugly Love, but I read Ugly Love around the same time as my son's situation. And like that book will forever be one of my favorite books, strictly because I can relate to it on such a personal level.
Mhm.
And I think that also plays a big part in people seeking out books that have these triggers in there that they can relate to. And that in that form, it can help them heal in that, like that way.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I think
Yeah.
that, like, for example, me, I've been through rape in my life, and rape in the form of like the original outcome was to get me pregnant, which was insane to me. And I
Wow.
feel like sometimes when I read about rape, and I feel like many people, if they read about rape or something traumatic that happened to them, they can see almost how the main character or the character replies to it or acts towards it, and that maybe that can give them like a different way of seeing things. So I think in that way it can be helpful. For me, I feel like a connection, like Beth said. I feel connection. I'll be like, oh my gosh, yes, I've been through that. You can do it. Let's push through, and then I don't know, automatically you're like connected to the book, even if it's poorly written, like Beth said.
Wow. Thank you
Yeah,
for
I
sharing
think
that, Marcy.
yeah, I've had a similar situation, and I think it really depends on like yeah, I think a lot of this has to do with like where I am in my life and
Mhm.
where and what kind of book it's trying to be. Like I'm thinking about the In Death series from JD Robb. So that main character has a really grim backstory from her childhood. Like her father was assaulting her, and it's a lot. Like it's a very intense backstory. But one of the things I love about that series is that she both has like a happy ending because it's got a romance at the heart of
Mhm.
it. So she's married to this like billionaire tech wizard dude. Like it's total escapist fantasy. So like she has like the happy ending with him, but she still has like a lot of trauma. Like she has all these nightmares and like she is really still dealing with her past. And that's the series I always think of as kind of balancing the two of like the escapism of like, yeah, you go, like you're making your life work for you, but also still like, yeah, some days are hard and some of the cases she catches are just like really difficult for her mental health, and like she really
Mhm.
goes through it. So it's cool when you can find a book that can kind of go both ways.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think on
So,
a general level, like I don't necessarily have a ton of triggers, but I find that the more stressful like my day-to-day life is at any given point, like I really like to read like the higher stressor books. It feels like I guess kind of what Elizabeth said, like the fact that I can start it and stop it. It's it's just like a break throughout the actual stress that I'm going through. So it's like, sure, let me dive into this person's head. They have it way worse.
all right, cool.
I think adrenaline also plays a part in like the horror and like darker things. It's kind of like roller coasters. Me and Elizabeth were talking about how like these mainstream thrillers like Ruth Ware or like Riley Sager, they're not hitting the
Hey, I
spot
didn't say Ruth
anymore. And we're like,
Ware. I stand Ruth Ware. For the
well,
record.
I'm not using them, but those are just the titles that everybody picks up. Those are what Barnes and Noble displays on the display. But like sometimes you want something. It's like okay, we have read this same whatever over and over again. Give us something a little more faster, a little more twisty or whatever. And it's kind of like riding a roller coaster. You ride this 50-foot roller coaster 20 times, and it's like okay, give me something that's a little higher, a little faster, like drops further. And I think it's very much like that in books. You want something that's gonna make your heart rate go up because you want that adrenaline rush. And like people who have anxiety, and I won't get on a 4-wheeler or I won't go on a roller coaster, but I will get my adrenaline from reading a book.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Beth. Seeking dark themes as a form of kind of excitement or getting that adrenaline boost. That's definitely a reason I think that some people can go for dark fiction. So I have another thought. Let's see. Authenticity. So I think this is probably, I think we kind of have been touching on this a little bit, but if everything's light, then nothing is light, right? So if you're looking for that kind of darkness as a form of leaving room for hope, and I think leaving room for hope and having that happy ending, not even necessarily happy ending, but hope, having some kind of darkness can magnify that or can open your perspective to be able to see that light where maybe it wasn't so obvious before.
I definitely think contrasting elements in a story, like you said, if you read nothing but like, you know, butterflies and rainbows all the time, eventually, like, I mean, me, if I read more than like, say 3 or 4 YA books in a row, I'm like, Jesus Christ, please give me some murder now because I am bored. I am so bored. And I like YA, don't get me wrong, I really like YA fantasy, but like, I just get so bored of that. It's not realistic. One of the comments, I can't see where it is now, but one of the comments is just like, you know, like, let's represent real life and the nuance of that, not just everything is great all the time, because it's not. It sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Let me see. Yeah, I like this comment, validating reading about other people's traumas.
Mm-hmm.
The villain.
It sort of gives you like a push, like, yeah, I could do it too, you know?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you guys for being so active in the chat. Like, I'm having a hard time keeping up, but I'm so happy that y'all are here for this.
I like that somebody said that they don't read about cockroaches. I am with you on that. I cannot do cockroaches at all.
I don't think I ran into cockroaches yet in a book.
Yeah,
so now I'm just like dreading the moment I do. I'm going to throw the book.
Yes.
For me, it's
Run
a
into
fungi.
and I am traumatized now.
From which one,
Which book?
Jaymes?
My best friend's exorcism. It was just so vividly, those tapeworms, and I have a dream about it. Literally.
I'm about to read that. So thank you for the warning.
Look, I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. It's
great.
We'll look at friendship.
Yeah.
Don't read the truth then, Jaymes.
Yeah, it's fungi for me. Like I
If
can
you want to read
feel
about
it on me.
read his other book.
Which one?
The Southern Book Club Guide has
Oh
cockroaches
my
in it.
gosh, yes.
I forgot about that.
But
That one.
You're right.
I do have it on the shelf, actually. So.
Oh, I love that's my favorite by him. But I just like, for example, I knew you were talking about Dead Inside when I was backstage, but that sounds so cool, backstage. But I like that cover. I love it so much. But why do we have to have the roaches on the cover? Why?
Oh.
There's no roaches in the story mentioned ever at all. It takes
None.
It takes place in a hospital. There's roaches in between paragraphs too. So I don't know why that's there, but I do appreciate the cover though. I don't like roaches, but I really like that cover. Hate the book, love the cover.
Yeah.
Okay, so since we're talking about Dead Inside, so this one I think is on the precipice of being quote unquote problematic because of the content. So what do you guys think about that kind of line between just dark and like actually problematic? Or is there a line there? What's the difference? Like how do we
I think tone is very important. Like is the problematic elements of a story just like gratuitous? Is it, you know, is there any real drive or reason behind it? Or is it an accurate representation of a character you would run into in real life? Because problematic people exist. I mean, we're all problematic. We all are ignorant. We all learn things every single day. So I think having, I don't know, it's realistic to me.
Okay. Are you guys all familiar with Dead Inside?
Yes, and I have thoughts.
Okay, have you read it, Marcy?
Oh yeah,
Do you guys know?
this
Can you like
the-
summarize it, or maybe
Oh,
for
I
the
have a
people
whole
that don't
TikTok
know?
where I have a TikTok where I summarize the entire book. If you want to go and know, but I don't want to spoil it for people in the comments. Like,
Yeah.
to tell you.
Ooh.
McKay just came out with a video that was fantastic today, and I was commenting on it, but
It deals with necrophilia.
Yeah.
Let's just say that,
Yeah.
and some other really.
Well, I read a
really
romance
dark-
book with that, so like a full-blown
Well,
romance that
okay.
deals with that one.
Ooh,
I'm
okay, that's
okay
a
with
great compare and
necrophilia.
contrast.
Yeah. And I would call
Somebody
it
snip that out.
problematic.
I'm okay with necrophilia because, like, I am the #1 fan of, Ted Bundy's fan club. Not really, but I'm okay with
know what you
cannibalism.
mean.
I read books about cannibalism all the time, and I'm completely okay with that. And, like, I am okay with a lot of things. But in this book, there is a scene where I felt like it makes you want to question the author. And then I read, like,
That's the exact point of this conversation. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
on TikTok. I did a TikTok because I did a review about it on TikTok, and then I had a bunch of comments asking if I could spoil the book for people so I could keep them from reading it, and so I did. And then I had comments on that of people telling me, and on Instagram, of people telling me that he went to a convention, like a horror convention, the author did, and reenacted the scene in the book that is so controversial. But, like, if you know what the scene is, why would you reenact that in public?
Also,
How, though?
how if we're talking about necrophilia, I'm also questioning how that was
No.
possible.
Did we bring a dead body?
No,
Excuse
no,
me.
no.
Susie,
know if
our
it's my-
local mortuary assistant, has decided to help us out today.
Too late. Very still today for it.
Because
Okay, so-
somebody told me that somebody recorded it and it was on TikTok somewhere, but I couldn't find the actual video of him doing this. And he's writing a sequel to the book, by the way.
Oh no. Well, he's gotten a lot of attention because it's so taboo.
I mean, it's crazy.
Is it at risk of getting banned from Amazon?
I don't think so. It's on Kindle.
then
Unlimited
that's where
and
I bought
everything.
mine.
They
I
ban things
wonder.
on Kindle Unlimited all the time.
Yeah,
on the
but-
romance side of things
but-
for like
Yes,
incest
but
and stuff.
no, because the one I read, which I'm not going to share the title of the necrophilia romance, it is based on Jack Skellington and Sally. It's like an interpreted twisted tale thing. And he literally digs up bodies and makes himself a doll thing, I guess. Sort of.
Okay.
It was grotesque. And for me, I think this is when the line gets iffy, is when we're reading romance, you're looking for that happily ever after, and it has to be believable. And that's when, like, the line, like that, like if I was reading a horror with this, I'd be like, yeah, whatevs. But when it's a romance and I'm supposed to believe this guy that digs up dead bodies and has sex with them deserves an HEA, I'm like, but do you? But do
I
you?
think he may, but after some therapy.
Yeah, but
Like,
there's no therapy
I don't think
involved.
that the
And
first
then
thing
at the end
he
of
needs
the
in
book,
his
he
life
like
is love.
adopts a child with his partner, and I was like, no, do
Wait. What is an HEA?
happily ever after.
Happily ever after.
Okay.
It's
Thank
a
you.
genre convention for romance, right? So every romance ends with a happy for now or happily ever after.
Mhm.
The couple is together and happy in some capacity.
Gotcha.
This book we're talking about, you said it's called Dead to Me?
Dead Inside.
Dead Inside. Okay, I think
Chandler
I'm thinking of
Morrison.
the TV show.
But that book, that romance, has been almost banned from Amazon multiple times. But other books, romance books, often get taken out of Kindle Unlimited and taken off Amazon. So that's why I asked that
Because,
question.
You know,
People
I've
are
read
puritanical about sex, so Amazon censors them.
Yeah.
I've read another Chandler Morrison. After reading Dead Inside, I really wasn't interested in reading another one of his books, but he wrote one of the splatter westerns. And I talk about this all the time because it upset me so much. The splatter westerns are it's like a total of 12 or 13 books, and they're all extreme horror. And they're all set in the 1800s. It's westerns, but just gory westerns. They're fantastic. And so I was excited to see what he was going to come up with. And this is where, like, we talk about, like, the person itself, because he inserts himself in this story. And so, like, every other chapter, so like you have a chapter where it's set in the 1800s. I mean, and it's brutal stuff, like fantastic stuff. I really liked his writing there. But then he has like another chapter where he inserts himself writing the book, and he talks about like these women coming to have sex with him, and that he writes these things because he feels like he has to like keep people there. And it's it was so weird, and so it left like a bad taste in my mouth for him. Like, he's so pretentious, and it just pulled me out, and that made the book like just 2 or 3 stars for me when it could have been 5 stars. So he's one of those authors where I'm like, I don't know him personally, but just by that one book where he inserts himself, it was just such a bad thing. I don't know.
Well, that gets to a comment Book Terror made about in romance, I don't mind problematic content as long as the author knows that what they're writing about. I think a lot of this gets into what I often describe as authorial posture, which is very hard for you to like nail down, but it's your general sense of like, what is the author's attitude towards what is happening on the page? And the more extreme the bounds of morality are being pushed, the more it's comforting to have some indication from the author that it's like, I'm not into this, but this is just like something I'm depicting in my fiction for whatever reason. Like Lolita, I don't think that Nabokov is down with pedophilia, right? Like, I'm not walking away from that book thinking that like, yes, this is something he's co-signing. Like, this is clearly the project of the book. But anytime the author, like, you can't tell, or you suspect that you think the author might be like, well, to Beth's example, like reenacting a scene in public of something that's like deeply transgressive and like immoral potentially, the more uncomfortable it is for you as the reader of like, I don't really know how to feel about this book because I can't tell how you feel about this author.
Right.
Well, Elizabeth had said like putting like a psychological frame between you and the content as far as us as the reader. And I think the more like intense you go into like taboo territory or just straight up possibly offensive territory, we really need that like clear frame. We need to know you are detached from it and that you can think about it from like an aerial bird's eye view rather than being right inside of it, and that you're so invested. It's like you're a writer. Just that's all we need.
Yeah, but that's also the thing about like writing as an art form is that a writer can make you think that they think a certain way about what they're writing about within the context of their book. And so you really can never actually know if you're being manipulated in that way. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like, can you ever really know what their intent is? And I realize that, you know, they want to, especially if it's problematic or something like that, and they say that you're inclined to believe them, and obviously like you want to trust that like I don't think every author is out here fooling me, you know, trying to like make me think they're a good person, but there is, you know, a little bit of but you just never really know.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I mean, I think never know. It's sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was saying, I agree. I don't think you can ever know. It's more, I think that gets into what you as the reader are comfortable with. And I think a strategy an author can take is like within the text, somehow signaling that this isn't like, hey, this is something I'm into. This is more a story. And I think maybe particularly within the confines of romance that can get.
Yeah. But I love that you brought that up, Mara, because that's why I wanted you here, because you always have that like perspective. I know. Yeah,
she's got such the words for it that I never have. I feel like I want to say this makes me think of a current discourse on book talk, or romance book talk, around a book that is a dark romance, been marketed as dark romance, right? And it is dark romance, but one of the key points in the books, which Heather was talking about with problematic content, which is I think where my line generally is are we perpetuating and not interrogating bad conspiracy theories, like QAnon stuff, because I've read books that are 100% just have weird QAnon type conspiracies in them in a romance, and not interrogating it. And then I'm like, do you believe this? Are you aware of it? Because you're just like, these people are nuts. Where are you coming from? But this current
message
book has
boards do not make me feel sexy. I'm just gonna put that out there. Like 4chan does
it's not the message
get me hot.
boards. It's like the weird conspiracies, like people eating babies. It's a whole thing in a book I was recently reading, and I was like, what is this doing in here? I'm reading a romance. So
okay, you're gonna have to give me some book recs. Some romance book recs, because it sounds like horror, and I'm into it.
Oh, I can hook you up. We're good.
Yeah, she's talking about all these books, and I'm like, I want to
this
make a
book
list,
has
please.
transphobia. Just DM me and I'll send you a list. But the transphobia in this one book, like the whole arc of a villain is like very reflective of a current political conversation we're having. And the author responded with, "I'm a liberal. I don't believe these things." And I'm like, but this is like an ongoing conversation about like people saying that like trans people are grooming children and this and like terrible, right? The terrible things that people are constantly saying. And I was like, do you not believe this? Because like you literally made it a central plot point of your story. And now I'm questioning like, I mean,
And
I
if you
didn't really
don't
wanna read the
believe
book
it,
anyways,
is it
but
responsible for you to
exactly.
Well,
It's
and
not
then
really
I feel like
responsible.
I feel like I'm the fun police, and it's like I don't want you to make me the fun police. Like I don't want to have to sit here in my
No,
fun
I don't want to be
romance
the fun police
and
either,
wonder
but-
about like if you are trying to like victimize trans children in Texas. Like I don't want to be thinking about this right now. I want to be thinking about
I don't either. I'm like I just want to
crippling
read
abs or
wild
something.
bonkers romance, but then I'm like, oh no, you're perpetuating a really terrible belief people have that is so inaccurate and damaging. That's what I like struggle. Just come to the romance side. We got wild books, y'all.
That's funny.
I never thought of dark romance as a path for horror readers into romance, but y'all's response has made me realize that maybe it's an angle that we should play up more.
I don't
Yeah,
I
you
think it would
should.
be.
You should, because I am like, okay, I read horror, but I like, to sprinkle some fun things. But dark romance, I was like, where have I been? Like, where has this thing been my whole entire life? Because I love it. I mean, I eat it up.
That's the best.
I've only tried one dark romance, and that was Sick Fucks by Tilly Cole. But I had to DNF it because they use pet names. Like, there's dark things in there that I didn't mind. They kill people and this, that, and the other. Like, sure, I don't mind that. But I DNF'd it because the pet names were just too much for me. That's the only reason why I don't dive into romance a lot.
Don't call me honey.
Don't
But
baby me.
You can murder someone, but don't call me honey.
It's, he calls her Dolly Darling. And I'm just like, you're in Texas.
Oh, I
get it,
cannot
but
do that
honey,
pet
I'm in
name.
Texas.
No.
Yeah, that's
And only the old women call us darling. A man's not going to come up to me and be like, hey, Dolly, darling. Go get it on in the bathroom.
No.
Was her name Dolly?
No, but they pretended when they were kids to be Alice in Wonderland. And so he was her Dolly. And then now they're grown-ass adults, and they still call each other Dolly. And I forgot what his name was. But the revenge plot and like the other things that go on in the book were really dark and good. But I just couldn't get over the cheesiness of it. I want the dark romance to be dark and cheese.
Yeah.
Alexa. I'm so happy to see all of y'all in the chat again. So what do you guys think about dark romance, just like as like we kind of again touched on this, but what about just like as a form of like morbid curiosity, like human nature, to explore from like a psychological perspective? For me, this is really a strong motivator for me, because I'm just so intrigued by why people do the things they do.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I'm reading dark fiction, it's so interesting to me when I get to delve into someone else's psyche, because I know from my perspective like what I would do or would not do. But when I get to see from another person or another character's perspective, like their motivations, that's what's really interesting to me, because I try to dissect those things and figure out, okay, what is going on in your head that makes you feel like this is reinforcing this behavior. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys feel the same way?
No.
No?
I'm opposite. I don't know. When I read romance is like besides like pet names, that just bothers me in romance books. But other than that, romance is like my escape from, like, if I read like 5 or 6 thrillers in a row and I just want an escape, I dive into romance as a fun time. I'm not thinking about what he like how he straightened her. Did he hold the door open for her? Other things like that. I just want, even if it's darker things or if it's toxic, as long as like it gives me the butterflies and like the kitty butterfly, whatever, like then it served its purpose. I look at them as just like handy when it comes to books versus like, I don't know. I don't dive deep into my romance and want to know what they're thinking, and like unless they're thinking about where's the condoms at. Other than that, I don't care.
But not even just romance
Hey, be safe.
specifically, but like the dark stuff that you like. Do you wonder about why when you're reading that stuff, like your serial killer stuff?
No, I know I'm fucked up. It's fine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I do that book, Savage Appetites, I think explores, like, particularly for women, like I do think that there is a level of awareness of our vulnerability in the world, and so like diving into that and like being curious about it. And I don't know, I mean, like I went through a Criminal Minds phase like when I was in college, and I was like, you know what, this is teaching me situational awareness. Like I've got my keys out when I'm walking to my car, like this. But it's like, you know, I've seen tons of TikToks of women of like you know, men pretending to react to listening to what their partners are listening to as they fall asleep, and it's like that sound of her head was cut off, her arms were cut off, like, and they're like, why are you falling asleep to this? But I don't know, I think that there is something about, I mean, I'm just a nosy bitch in general, like I'm just curious about the human experience, like in all of its lightness and all of its darkness. So
I feel like if I'm reading something about true crime or watching something about true crime or actual serial killers, like real live serial killers in human physical form, I am super curious. I wanted to go to school to be a psychiatrist and work with like murderers and things like that. So like when it's real life, I do like to dive in. And why is he acting like that? Was it his childhood? Was it his mother? Was it this? But when I'm reading fiction, I am not trying to figure out what was his trauma, her trauma. I'm just there for a good, sometimes toxic time, and I'm okay with that because it's fiction. But if it's real life, yeah, I'm diving in.
Mm-hmm.
No, I feel like I definitely like want to know the motivations behind the character. Like I really like to sit and think like Elizabeth said, like I know what I would do in the situation, and of course most of us would be like, get the fuck out of Dodge, let's go. But I really like to know why, like say it's a horror book, why is this character sticking around in this super creepy mansion with this old creeper dude that's like hitting on them? Like why are you doing it? I definitely think the curiosity is a huge part of that.
And not only why though, but like what are the circumstances? Because I think we all have the capacity, like we can say like you quoted me saying, I know I would never do that, but if I was in that situation, do I really know how I would react to that? I don't know.
What's happened leading up to that point as well. Because
like
trauma, I mean, makes you do, like, we're all the sum of our experience. We're all going to do things differently. So it's like what led up to this point, or the jumping off point of the plot.
Yeah. And I think we also like all have the capacity within us to like the scale of like good and bad, right? Mm-hmm. There's no person that is all good, and there's no person that is all bad. And I think every choice we make, it makes us take one step here, one step back on the spectrum. Like we're constantly in this like continual, like fluid idea of what is good or bad. And so like, I think we all have the capacity for darkness. Just like psychologically speaking, like from like a, I don't really know how to explain it, but like, I think I have memories of things that I did when I was a kid that I am not proud of. But as I've grown, I look back on that and I'm ashamed of it. And I say like, how did I behave like that? And then I think if I had gone down this path in my life instead of this path, like starting at that point, where would I be now? You know, like I could be a completely different person, but I'm constantly making choices all day, every day that define who I am, but also like it's a constantly weaving fluid motion between this idea of good and evil. Mm-hmm. So I think that's why I'm so fascinated with dark things, and why I'm so fascinated with the idea of like what motivates people to do certain things. Because I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm like a perfect angel. You know, I have done things that I am not proud of, but like I try to make choices that I will be proud of. But we're human. That's humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like what Lady Lovestead reads, but she said fiction is a way to enjoy a toxic time without anyone else getting hurt.
Yep.
Which I think that's a great way to kind of sum up a lot of what I think about it, of like, why, do I want to interrogate why so many people are into like faux incest romances? Do I really want to interrogate like why people love, watching people be brutally murdered on page? Like, I don't know, but it seems to be some sort of outlet for us that a lot of people need for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't that part of why we're glad we have fiction as opposed to
Yes.
other real life outlets for some of that?
The Purge.
Yeah.
With me, I feel like sorry, I have toddlers. I don't go into a lot of fiction books wanting to know the psyche behind the characters because these aren't real people. This is what an author who probably has never even killed a dog, much less people, wrote. Unless it's somebody like Lucinda Berry, who is an actual doctor. But in true crime, though, that's why I like reading true crime, because you do get to like kind of learn why these people do the things that they do. But with my fiction, I just like to go in for a good kill.
Fine. Yep. That's exactly how I feel as well. It's like I don't want to, like, I love when people, like when I go on lives with like Kat, for example, or like the Stacks of Strange, and she'll sit there and she talks about how she thought about this when she read it, and it fascinates me because I'm just like dumb when I read. Like everything goes over my head and I'm just enjoying the words, but I love hearing people dissect what they read. I can't.
I'm the opposite. Like I look into things more than I should, to the point where like I cannot enjoy it sometimes.
That makes me not enjoy the book as much. Yeah. If I'm like, oh, this is too fake. Oh, this Axe deodorant wasn't even invented when this book took place. Like I don't break it down or like search it out. I am here for the kill, the stabbing and slabbing, or the betrayal, whatever we're doing. That's what I want to read about. And if you can like really like throw up a curve, like when I read, what is it called? Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke, like how that ends. Like, I don't care like what is going on in their mind. I just want to know more. Like, what kind of meat did you serve her? I don't know. Just, yeah.
I wouldn't say that I like dissect everything I read. I am very much a dumb reader as well. Like, I love to just put on the blinders. That's why I read a lot of YA. But I feel like there are just certain books that I just want to know more. Like, it is like adding to my experience and my enjoyment of it. But I definitely like understand like doing that all the time. It's just too much work. Like it's a lot to process if you're doing that with every book, especially as much as booktubers read. I mean,
it is. It's a lot.
It is a lot.
It can add a weight for sure. And Jaymes, I know go ahead, Beth.
Sorry, I just read the Alex Cross. I like to read really old books, so I read an Alex Cross book by James Patterson. And in the first book, there is a character, a villain, which at the time the book was written, because it was written like 30 years ago or something, we didn't have all this information that we have today on this type of individual. I hate to say it like that, but I don't want to give away. But anyway, like those kind of things, I do want to know more. And I want to know, like, I can't really talk about it because I don't want to spoil what's going on in the book. But there are some instances where I'm like, I want to know what's going on in the people's brains and how this came about and this, that, and the other. But for the most part, I'm in it for a good time.
Yeah.
I'm just here for the sexy times in all my books. It's fine. Not really, but I like to see how and what brings a couple together in my romance books. So if that makes sense.
It makes me feel better though, because sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
But when I watch Elizabeth, and Elizabeth talks about her books, or Mara, or even Kayla from Books and Lala, and they break them all down, and I'm just like, I am in the wrong environment here. I need to go back. Right? I'm just reading for the story. I don't know anything. I'm just like, this book is 10 out of 10 stars, read it. Up next, like
My people, I think that's why I don't come out with a lot of videos, because I mean, I don't know if it's imposter syndrome, probably, but I'm like, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just gonna be like, I love this book, it's fantastic, it's phenomenal, woo, and that's it. I don't know anything else.
Random question. When you guys record, do you ever just like finish recording and you're like, oh shit, I don't know anything that I just said? And then
All the time.
It works out.
Mhm.
Like,
All the time.
I'm
When I
just
rewatch
I'm just gonna tell you if I loved it or hated it and why. And I usually don't have a clear plan for what I'm gonna say, which is very obvious. So yeah.
I'm always like, did that make sense?
Which is something we should not say as women. And I do that too. But like, oh, we need to have more, we need to like stand by our thoughts and what we say, you know?
Thank God for editing, right? That's,
Oh
I'm
my
like,
God, yes.
hopefully I said enough that I can fix it in the edit.
Yes, you're like, okay.
And if not, you can just record again real quick. Be like, I messed this up.
Exactly.
Here I am editing, fixing this.
How can I put this puzzle together to make it make sense? Izzy, I'm interested in like any other thoughts you might have about romance in particular and like dark themes that, as opposed to like horror, because I know a lot of us are, well, at least Marcy and Beth and I read a lot of thrillers and horror, and Jaymes does too, but he reads more fantasy, I think, than we do. And Mara just reads everything. Anything in particular about romance that you want to point out?
I mean, I think the hardest part is like any dark romance obviously gets pointed at as like, well, you're glorifying whatever thing we want to say, or romanticizing whatever thing. And like sometimes yes, but then sometimes no. Like I think it's one of those things where it's like you have to figure it out. And I do think like how they were talking about with romance, I think the biggest thing with dark romance is you have to know what you want, because like that's like a pool you're jumping into, you know what I mean? Like there's a range of things, just like horror and everything else. Like I think people think it's a smaller subgenre of romance than it is, if that makes sense. And I think that's one key point. Heather did drop some good recs, I think, in the chat if anybody's looking for some romance recs.
Yeah, I'll pop them up.
And feel free to DM me. I'm happy to rec some dark romance
I'm here
if you know what
snapping
you
pictures.
Yeah. Well, and you know, I think one of the differences, like just even in, I suggested, Izzy, that you join because I feel like you, with romance news, have to wade into this quite frequently. But because romance has some level of like aspiration to it, it's a different situation. Like no one's aspiring to be serial murdered, or very few people are aspiring to be serial murdered.
Don't tell me what I'm not doing, Mara.
I don't want to. I don't want to speak for your truth, but you know, like love or romance is not maybe universal, but is much more closer to a universal experience. So like I think that there's a level of like closeness to people's lived experience. So when you start having these very dark situations where like consent is either dubious or non-existent, or like I said, like there's a whole incest thing that's very a thing.
Yep.
It gets dicey, I think, for people, because there's a different kind of mindset that they're bringing to the story of like, well, okay, but I've actually fallen in love with someone and that's like completely fucked up, versus like, I've never been serial murdered.
Or like, you know, we're trying to root, and like I know people that love this book, there's a romance where in the beginning the hero sexually assaults the heroine, and we follow them having a romance throughout the whole book. I haven't read it yet because I don't know if mentally I'm in a place I want to read that even, but I'm like, we can make it work probably, but also an author could handle it badly and it's just not good.
Yeah, which is part of why I really like speculative romance, because it lets me just like not have to think about any of these questions. Because I'm like, we're on a different planet. This is a, you know, octopus man with 5 penises.
No, same. And that's, I mean, that's where I run when I need my like refresh from like dark or whatever. I'm like, let me go read the weird alien monster books.
Yeah, it's just like there's no morality. This is just a different world. So like I don't even have to think about these questions.
I don't know any better.
Yeah, it's like dark is in the eye of the beholder as well. So like some people may not think that, or some people will think Karen Slaughter is dark, and then when I read it, I did at first, but now when you go back and you read it, it's like not as dark to me. I definitely think it's also in the eye of the beholder, and like what also people would consider, like, does she really sleep with dead bodies because she likes to read things? Or it's also like weird how you can watch this on movies and stuff. You can go to the movies and watch a horror movie and nobody bats an eye. But if you were to read that in book form, people are more to judge you. Makes no sense.
Maybe because you also in fiction, like you can get deeper into the perspective of the characters. So like maybe it's like, ooh, you know, it's one thing to watch that, like me watching it, but having to be in the person's head, I think sometimes people feel like it's just too much. But to me, that's one of the cool things about books is that you can really like.
Like, most people view movies like really passively too. Like I feel like a general population thing. Most people are very passive when they're watching a movie, but with a book, unless you're literally just reading words and not comprehending anything, which what's the point? Like you have to be super active in the darker content. So maybe that's a reason for like more of like a stigma. But I mean, it's the same thing at the end of the day. It's storytelling. So
Yeah. And as to where a movie is like 2 hours long and a book might take you, you know, several days and stuff.
Yeah.
I love horror and I love horror movies, but I can't watch horror movies without making my husband get up at 4 a.m. with me to go to the bathroom with me at 40 years old. Like it is horrible. But if I read a horror book, it just does not faze me. I guess because I could control the imagery and stuff, but it doesn't faze me at all.
Same. Sometimes I wonder if I'm not as scared from books because my imagination is just lacking.
Yes.
Well, it's like
Well, and I'll skim things if they're too much for me. If it's
That's the
getting
thing,
too
you can-
real,
yeah, you
I'm
can
like,
skim it easier.
okay, okay, we're back to where I can read this again.
I mean,
like-
the brain too, like it's a lot different when there's just like spikes in the music and then you're in the theater and the whole seats are shaking. Like it's a very different medium. So
being able to have music behind you or like tone, like to set the tone and put you in a state already before that, like that big, like, you know, whatever comes, the shock moment, definitely adds to that level of anticipation and dread. But I also think there's some really good comments here. I love that Jessica Lady Lovestead said in dark romance, I like seeing two broken people find their person. And it actually validates that you don't have to be perfect to deserve being loved, which I love that sentiment. Because people are broken. And that's one of those like authenticity things, I think, because like that's authentic, that's real. Like people are broken. Like if you sit down to read a romance and there are just these two perfect people falling in love, it's like where's the relatability there, you know? If you're being real and you're saying like I am flawed, I am a flawed human being and I've made mistakes and I've messed up, but you know what, I still deserve to find love. Like that's so much more intriguing.
Yeah, more empowering as well.
Exactly.
I'll say I haven't found a romance with like two perfect people falling in love yet. So if I do, I'm gonna have to make sure I note it.
That may be a bias of mine because I'm not a romance reader, but thank you.
No, I know. I was just saying in general. Like I will say, I feel like most don't. Most modern romances don't.
Well,
Actually,
but then most older romances have like an actual like all of them were rapists pretty much as the heroes.
Yep, pretty much.
So what like all romance was technically dark romance pre like 95.
Yeah, I feel like pre like 2005 almost.
Yeah.
Just kind of a little bit.
Heather said, I love watching sociopaths or I'll burn you down the world for your possessive characters.
That is one of my favorites as well.
That's one of my favorites too. And it's like, that's one of the things where I'm like, I'm like, ugh. It's hard for me because I just started taking like a women's study class. And so I'm constantly like just filling my head with like, you know, powerful women and like articles and things that about gender, about women, about things. And so like, I'm so like, this is so like floating in my head that like, when I try to read something like that now with that specific trope, it's almost like I'm stopping myself from enjoying it, even though I really do like that. So I have this conflict within me where I'm like, can I just let myself like that without feeling the guilt of it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can send you some theory if you want to like.
I love that. Yeah, I'd love that.
Because one feminist reading of those kinds of books is that really like it's two halves, like it's women are identifying with both the powerful and the powerless. So it's like an exploration rather than like male female. It's like an exploration of both sides of your own power, of being both the actor and the acted upon. So sometimes when like I get bummed out by a book and I'm like, I really don't like the gender dynamics, I'm like, I'm just going to choose to apply the like, I'm identifying with both characters in this scenario. They represent two different parts of my nature.
Okay, that might work for me.
I like that idea for a solution.
I mean, if you look at like classic, I would say 60s to mid 90s, I guess that range of like slasher film, they're all very misogynistic, right? But then also the highest like demographic is women, because they do find something empowering about watching those films. So, I mean, there's something to be said there for sure.
Mm-hmm. So, I do want to bring up books like Jaymes. I know you and I both really enjoyed My Dark Vanessa. Has anyone else read that one?
I didn't, but isn't that the one with the college professor and?
Yeah, high school. I think it's high school professor.
Oh,
it's supposed to be based on or like inspired by Lolita, which I have not read.
Yeah.
But that one I find really intriguing because it's so hard to read. Like that specifically for me was really hard to read and to get through. It's about like this teacher that's grooming his student, and the student, you have kind of two perspectives of her as she's going through it. And then years later, these allegations are coming out where other students are saying that he sexually assaulted them and things like that. But then she, our main character, she can't come to terms with that. And she is having this internal battle within herself that she can't separate the love from the idea that this was abusive. And so she's kind of going through the motions of that. And there were some scenes in there that were just really, really, really hard to get through. But at the same time, I feel like this is something that's super taboo that just people don't want to talk about. But the commentary that's being said throughout that, I think is so important, and is so, like the way she writes it from her perspective as like a 14, 15-year-old girl, it's romanticized because it's from her perspective. So you almost like feel it with her. You almost like feel it like falling for this guy, and you completely relate to how her emotions are, and remembering how it was for me as a teenager and how heightened those emotions felt. It feels wrong to acknowledge it as you're reading it, but at the same time, it's like this is so important to say, because that's what people don't realize. And when we're avoiding talking about things like that, that's what we're avoiding, is talking about the fact that it feels real to them. And that's why it's abuse, because it feels real.
Mm-hmm. The manipulation that takes place in that book is just so, like you said, because you're reading it through the perspective of the 15-year-old, like you're sitting there, you're a full-grown adult, like you're reading it, you're like, this is not okay. But that part of your mind that is in that character, you fully understand what she's going through, where she's coming from. And it is super uncomfortable. Like, I mean, our society is just really not ready to fully embrace a book like this. But I think so many positive things could come out of conversations about this book. Like, I mean, Elizabeth knows, but like, I really connected with it in a way that I didn't expect at all. The whole time I was reading it, I was messaging her, and I was like, I really am scared to admit how much I like this book on the internet. Like, I don't know how that's going to go for real, because it is so taboo. But I feel like I came out of that book an entirely different person, a more aware person, someone who can understand a victim of this type of situation in a whole new way, and could have conversations with them if that was something they needed, and not feel like, I don't know what to say right here. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it really informed who I am as a person for the rest of my life. Like,
Yeah, I read My Dark Vanessa, but I also read Lolita. I read Lolita years ago, and I, like you, James, I am terrified of saying that I loved Lolita. And I loved Lolita from just a fiction point of view, even though that book is based on a real story. If anybody has read Lolita, the real Lolita, which is a true crime book, is really, really good. But
Oh.
My Dark Vanessa, I have conflicting feelings about it. I don't know if it's because when I read Lolita, it's a story about a much younger girl, and I think that really messed me up. But with My Dark Vanessa, I really related to the main character in that sense, and it upset me because everybody was saying how it was very toxic for her and manipulative, but from me, I was like, no girl, you continue feeling what you're feeling. And I was like, I don't know, like connecting with her, and I'm like, you're right. And that made me feel bad, you know what I mean? Because I know it was wrong, what the man was doing was wrong, but in her brain it was love, and in my brain it would have been love also. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense, and that's why, like, that's the whole conflict for me, is that I felt that too.
Yeah.
And it's also, I feel, sorry, give me 1 second.
I haven't read neither of those books, but it kind of reminds me of, I don't know if y'all have read Saving Noah. It's like one of those books where you feel guilty for feeling sorry for the main character because of what he does, because he's a pedophile, but you get to see like how he's treated. He's not a little kid, he's 16, but that's still very young. But it's one of those books where it's like, I don't even want to recommend it because I don't want you to look at me in a different light. But Dr. DeBerry did a good job at making me feel remorseful for him. Kind of.
That's the thing with My Dark Vanessa too. Like, obviously the villain of the story is the professor, and like, again, as an adult sitting there, you can't really turn that off in your brain. Like, it's always there. You're like, this is so fucked. What's going on? But there's a certain part of the book that I won't say anything as to not spoil, but I messaged Elizabeth, and I was like, I feel really like, I feel bad for this guy. And it's like, he is the villain. He's the one doing something wrong. But we all have, like, I think she just did so well showing at least somewhat that he has humanity, and that sometimes he really doesn't even think that what he's doing is wrong, even though it is. Like, he probably thinks he's in love too. It's just a whole fucked up cycle, honestly.
Yeah, that's what I was about to ask you guys. Did you feel like he really fell in love with Vanessa, or that he was just taking advantage of her? Because in my mind, I was like, oh my gosh, he really does love her. They need to be together. Like, stupid, I know.
And it can be both. Like, you can love someone and take advantage of them. Like, it happens every single day, unfortunately.
I love that, James. Yeah, I agree completely.
Like,
well, it makes me think of. Oh, sorry, James. I didn't mean.
Oh no, you're good. You're good.
Oh, this conversation makes me think of the documentary Finding Neverland or Leaving Neverland, which was with Michael Jackson's.
Oh yeah.
Two of his, I would say, victims, and that's really what a lot of that documentary is about: is the grooming process and how it doesn't feel like abuse; it feels like love, and exactly what you were just saying, James, that especially one of them, like, he literally had a marriage ceremony with him. And so in his mind, he's like, this is not my abuser. This is my husband. Like, this is the love of my life. And yet,
And what we're not willing to talk about on a, at least societal level, is that people who are abused have a much higher likelihood to turn around and abuse someone else in the same way. And I think, I feel like pedophilia is like the number one thing that everyone is like, burn them all, like kill them, like whatever. And I'm like, okay, I understand the sentiment. Like, I grew up believing the same thing. Like, let's just round up all pedophiles and whatever. But that doesn't stop the problem. Like, we need to be asking what we can do on a societal level to help people who have gone through this trauma so that they can deal with it and move on and not have to pay it forward to someone else. So
yeah. James, you should definitely read Saving Noah, because that definitely dives into that those themes. And that's one thing that I don't even know where I stand about. Because like, I don't know. Like, I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah, because there's like studies and stuff talking about how people are born that way, with that mindset, with that like sexual
desire.
Yeah. And when you read Saving Noah, who's written by Dr. Lucinda Berry, she's retired, well, she's an author full time now, but she was a trauma psychologist. And it's really interesting to read because on the back it says, "We forgive murderers, but not pedophiles." And this talks about, he's like 15 or 15, 16 around when he's going through this. And he doesn't even want to be like, you know what I mean? It's heartbreaking, but it definitely opens your eyes because like sometimes people, like they can't help who they fall in love with, even though it's morally wrong.
And like,
I'm gonna read that. I wrote it down because I really want to read that book.
Yeah, it's one that you like you don't crave reading that. You're not like, oh, I'm so excited to read that because you know it's just going to make you feel a certain way, but it's definitely worth the read. And not that it relates to Saving Noah, because it doesn't. That's kind of like a different situation. But this whole like fine line between abused and abuser, like Jaymes was saying, I think there's a very fine line in there. Like at some point, it's not your fault, but it's your responsibility to behave a certain way. And I feel like that with mental health too. Like I have mental health issues and it's not my fault, but it's my responsibility to take care of it. It's my responsibility to seek help when I need it. And I feel like that kind of can reach over into that same conversation about like people that are abused and that who then turn and become the abuser. It's sad, but
the thing too is like in a lot of circles, I guess, in like, I don't want to say medical field, but I guess like therapy, stuff like that. There are a lot of, I mean, most therapists are gonna tell someone who comes in, and if they actually have the balls to say that like, hey, I'm having this issue, I need help with this. Most of the time it's gonna be, oh, well, don't act on it and it's not a problem. But it's like, that's not really a solution.
How do I get there?
Yeah, it's like, what do you mean don't act on it? Like I think about it all the time or like whatever. And then they're just, it's like, oh, don't do anything illegal and you're fine. But it's like, I feel like there's got to be a different answer than that. But it's just this super stigmatized thing that no one wants to talk about. And like, I don't want to talk about it either, but I also want, a better future for kids and for people who have experienced something like this, or even people who haven't, like Beth said, that maybe just have the attraction and don't know why, don't know where it comes from. Like, I want them to be free of that as well, or at least be able to cope with it and not hurt anyone.
I don't think, there possibly could not, there's probably not like a end all, like if we can stop all these pedophiles, like with this 1 or 2 trips to the psychiatrist, like maybe there's not like a neuter them, chop their wee off and call it a day. Like maybe there's not like a full blown, like set in stone solution to helping each individual because we're all different. And it's like
there are certain things that are, that can be done to help. But like, I want to be very clear because we're having this conversation and it's like, it's very sensitive. I just want to be very clear that we're not like justifying this kind of behavior. Like, I just want to like make sure nobody here thinks that, because even though like we can have this conversation, and that's what I love about this, that we can kind of investigate and look into the crevices and the corners of this kind of subject. I just want to be very clear that we're not saying that it's okay.
Definitely
that as well.
Sorry, Beth, I interrupted you.
No, it's okay. Well, it's kind of like I'm addicted to food. Okay, like I'm just gonna put it out there. You can probably tell.
Me too, girl. Me too.
And there's an easy solution to that, right? Like take all the food out of my house, close down all McDonald's. But for somebody like Noah, we can't just remove all the children from the world. Like it's a temptation that's going to be in their daily life. Whether it's nieces, nephews, they can watch Casper the Friendly Ghost and there's a little girl in it. It can spark up these thoughts that they can't control. And it's just something that
it's so complex.
Yeah. It's so nuanced, so many like facets to the program, I guess. But I really do think, and of course, like I'm not a doctor, I don't know anything. But I really do think if there was a place in society where people who are dealing with this could at least just talk about it and not feel like their entire world would come crashing down. They're going to get fired, blah, 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 blah. Obviously, if you do something, yes. But just to talk about it, I think can help a lot of people. Like, a lot of this comes from repression. Like, I know, just speaking from someone in the queer community, there's a lot of people in the queer community who have been sexually abused as a child. And there's a lot of people, at least in the gay male community, that I've met that have some of these issues. And I'm like, you know, what do we do? But there's really, as we said, there's not an answer to this, but I do think just being able to open up and talk about it, the fact that conversations like this can happen, you know, it's just like most people aren't cool with a conversation like this, but
Yeah.
just break that stigma, I guess.
Which is probably why most people steer clear of the books that we like to read.
Exactly, yeah.
But at the same time, so if you think of like 50 Shades of Grey, like when that came out, that was really edgy, right? And like the fact that suburban moms were reading 50 Shades of Grey, that was like, oh, they're kinky, you know? But
I mean,
like,
they were already
today-
reading books like that, though. Everybody didn't know.
50 Shades made it like
Okay.
socially acceptable, I guess.
But like, yeah, as like a general thing,
Yeah.
like the conception or the perception of it, it was kind of edgy at the time. So like now it's not so much. Like if someone were to pick up 50 Shades of Grey, like and announce it to the world, they'd be like, okay.
I mean, they're just going to get stared at because people want to be like, oh, it's terrible.
Yeah, it is terrible. I read it.
It's terrible.
I mean, I'm not saying it's great fiction, but it is what it is. It's, you
Hey,
know,
I've only
for
read
its time,
one-
it's fine. I
Like, my
enjoyed it when I
grandmother-
read it back in the day.
my grandmother reads like 50 Shades of Grey and stuff, but she before that, like you said, like they may not have known that they were reading these romance books because people see they see Fabio on the cover and they think, oh, that's just like they haven't read it.
Yeah,
are
they're
some
like, it's just
romance
cresting
books
and
that are darker than 50 Shades of Grey. Or at least
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
there's a
That's like
lot.
vanilla BDSM. Like 50 Shades is also misrepresentative as well of the BDSM
Oh, yeah.
community, but we won't get into that. That's a whole
No,
other.
that's a whole other can of worms.
That's,
open with
yeah,
50
that's a whole other
Shades,
thing. But you know,
But
I
in
saw
general,
I remember when that came out, back then I was flying every week to my client site, and I kept seeing 50 Shades of Grey on the plane every week, and it was like slowly taking over the plane. And eventually I was like, okay, here are some businessmen sitting here next to me reading 50 Shades of Grey,
That's
like this like
amazing.
50-year-old, like, you know,
That's amazing.
advertising executive or
I
whatever.
love
like-
it.
Yeah, I was
awesome.
reading them in college. They
Yeah.
were part of my like OG romance journey. Or,
I love
That's
that.
awesome.
like into adult romance, but I also like knew already like they were not.
I really tried. I really tried to get through that first book, man.
I read the first one. That was it.
I really.
I did. I've never read the books, but I day drank and watched all 3 movies, and that was like a good Saturday.
Sounds like a good day.
Yeah, it was like
I
it was
like-
a really
that's a
fun
good day.
Saturday. Yeah,
It's a really-
I had
that's a
some
fun
fun.
day.
it.
I've
Yeah,
actually been like kind of wanting to rewatch the movies recently, and I have no clue why. I have zero attachment to these, but like
They're-
I was just sitting thinking the
They're
other day. I was
kind
like,
of
wow,
fun.
50 Shades of Grey would be
my
fun.
favorite one is the 3rd one, and it's definitely the worst one. Like, it's not because I like it, but because it was just so like wild and just bad. And
I actually kind of bought their romance in the 3rd one, so I was like, okay, love it.
I haven't read any of those books yet.
I haven't either.
You're good.
I saw this meme though where it said if 50 Shades of Grey was, or if Christian Grey was poor and lived in a trailer park, 50 Shades of Grey would be an episode on Criminal Minds.
Oh, 1000%. Yeah.
Don't disagree. And this, it's pretty much average, truly.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I
not
would say it's-
quality wise. I don't think
I was
E.L.
gonna say,
James's
quality,
writing is
it's-
great, but
Yeah.
I would say it's not as
It's pretty
spicy as
light.
people think it is.
Yeah,
is.
I mean, it's pretty vanilla.
I mean, for
Maybe like with a
traditionally
little sprinkles.
published books, it does have a lot comparatively for that time.
For that,
As
yeah,
far
I
as-
guess for that.
Like
time.
if you take it in the time frame it was released, not currently.
Yeah.
You know, that was one of the
Exactly.
early books that had like sex toys in it, and I don't feel like you saw that a lot previously. You're like, oh,
like-
so spicy.
In like
Oh.
pop culture, you know,
Literally,
or
all I
like
remember
general
is the
culture.
tub scene where she like gave him a hand job in the tub. That's all I remember.
I don't
Yeah,
remember that.
Cat,
I forget it.
Cat
Yeah.
put a comment. It says there's a YouTube channel that edits movie trailers at different genres, and they have 50 Shades. I need to know what this YouTube channel is.
That's
That's
Screen
cat
Rant.
sounds
That sounds
great.
like something they would do.
But like, so my point with bringing that up though was that like how we viewed it when it came out as opposed to now. And so like how we view things like My Dark Vanessa or Saving Noah or things like that now, like will that change in the future? You know,
Probably.
will we have more open dialogue with that sort of thing in the future? Because at least even though like we look at 50 Shades now and think like, oh, whatever, like it's an average romance, like hopefully we can get to a point in the future where we're having open dialogue about other, you know, other things that impact us socially as well.
I don't know if that the grooming situation or the pedophile situation will ever change, though, because if we look at when Lolita was written all the way to now, it's still to this day something that people don't like to talk about. So
That's a good point.
yeah, I'm wondering if, you know, it'll continue being like this with this particular subject.
I guess my answer would be like, I hope so. I hope that we can, you know, break down the barrier a little bit and just be like, sure, let's talk about this, because I mean, we know how I feel about open dialogue around the subject, I guess. But do I actually seeing it change? Maybe like millimeters by the time we are all dead, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But
I also, this is totally off topic, but I saw something earlier that said dark, like fiction, typically sells itself on the like topics or triggers that are in the books versus like if you read literary fiction, you're going to have the names on the books really sell the book, like Nora Roberts or Nicholas Sparks or whoever. But people who generally look for darker books, they don't seek out certain authors unless it's like Stephen King, but they seek out like the actual content in the book, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
that
would
is
agree with
interesting.
that. For myself personally, I would definitely agree.
It's also unfair because like bookstores and stuff, they don't carry the dark romance nor the dark horror unless
No,
it's
not
like
always.
Stephen King and Dean Koontz.
Yeah.
But
And also being like an audiobook reader,
That too.
the majority of the time, like so much horror is not available in audio, and it's really frustrating.
I mean, I can narrate some books, you guys. You know, I'll do it for free too. I mean,
All right. Well, is there anything else that anybody thinks that we haven't touched on in this conversation that you want to bring up?
it was a very like well-rounded conversation. I loved it.
I
Yeah,
think
we went,
I agree.
went a lot of places.
There's a
There's a lot of
comment.
them.
There's a comment where she talks about the Little Mermaid and the Sea Witch. I was
Yeah.
also thinking about that as well because I didn't watch like horror movies as a kid, but I did watch cartoons that were quite like scary. And it's like we have sought out horror or like dark things from a very young age. So like you have Toy Story. At the very beginning of Toy Story, Rex is like raw, you know, and it scares the crap out of my kids, but they still enjoy it because
Yeah.
it's like scary, you know. And it's
Disney is dark.
Yeah.
Disney is dark.
Definitely.
especially if you look up the roots on like Snow White and stuff, they're really dark. But it's like it's something that we've sought out our whole lives is darker, triggering things, even if it's done on a lighter scale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kids love being scared.
Yeah, I have a 5-year-old stepdaughter, and she loves witches right now. She's been a witch for the last 2 years for Halloween, and we watched the Wizard of Oz and the witch scene where the Wicked Witch of the East appears, and it scares the crap out of her, but she loves it so much.
Okay,
every time.
Scary though.
It's scary.
That movie, I don't know why. That movie just really messes with me. Like it triggers me, and I don't know what it is. It's so creepy. Yeah.
I've never seen it.
It's
Wizard of
so
Oz?
dark.
You've never seen
It's
The Wizard
creepy.
of Oz, Beth?
Like I've walked in on people watching it. It just doesn't look like something I would enjoy. So
You may
Oh
have
my
missed your
gosh.
window to enjoy it. It's good
You
when
might
you're a
have.
kid.
Kind of must be like a childhood thing, I think. But even then, like I like Wizard of Oz more now as an adult than I did as a kid. I absolutely hated it as a child.
I was
Yeah.
obsessed as a kid. I wanted to be Dorothy. The cat says the monkeys haunt her to this day.
Yeah, I feel
Well,
that.
people are so scared by that tunnel scene in Willy Wonka.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
that is
Like I feel like there's a few of those scenes from your childhood that it's like it scared the crap out of you, but you kept
Yeah.
watching it.
I definitely thought Gene Wilder was like gonna murder one of those kids.
Gene Wilder's the best.
I feel like that's the subtext.
Might have.
honestly.
I actually watched the original Willy Wonka the other day, and I was watching it with Denver, the dog, and I knew. So like, Denver's weird because he gets triggered by like things on TV. If he sees anything animal shaped, whether it's like cartoon, real life, anything, or like editing where the sound is tense, he freaks out and he'll like attack the TV. But that scene where Gene Wilder is walking, he's exiting the factory to greet the kids down that like carpet, and then he like acts like he's all frail, and then he does a somersault. I knew it was going to trigger Denver, and the second he did the somersault, Denver just freaked out and just started jumping at the TV and just attacking him. And for some reason, I was like, "Yeah, he's creepy. I know."
It's like good instinct
I know.
puppy.
Yeah, it was a creepy moment, but it worked. It was effective, so I'll give him that.
Facts.
All right. Well, I think we've been at it for an hour and a half, so I think that now is probably a good time to call it. I do want to say thank you to all of you for joining me tonight. Like, I appreciate you so much. Does anybody have anything coming up on your channels that you want to talk about, that you want to let people know about?
Maybe I'll post.
Same here, James. Same.
So, okay, so for anybody that's watching, if you're not following everybody here, go ahead and subscribe and follow them. They're all amazing. And yeah, and just thank you so much for being here. Anyone who's watching live or watching during the replay, I appreciate everybody. This was my second ever live, and I think it was a success. I'm very happy with how this went.
Yeah,
And I'm very happy that we had to have this, like, that we got to have this in-depth conversation. So I appreciate all of you.
Thanks for having me, Elizabeth.
Yes,
It was
thanks
so
for
much fun. And
Well,
I
thank you
met
for having us.
so many new like booktubers that I just while we were on the live, I was subscribing to everybody. So
Oh, good, good, good. All right. Well, let's call it a night then. I will see you guys soon. And take it easy.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, everybody left.
Well, I think we're still alive,
Yes, we are.
but I think that I don't think that the. Let's stay and just make sure that
Just to make-
she
yeah.
comes back and ends it. Let me.
Oh, okay, okay.
Do you? So you need to hit in live.
Okay, all right, I got this. I'm on top of this. I'm like
No,
a
it's all
professional,
good.
you guys. Don't
It's all
worry.
good.
Bye, guys.